You get a phone call from your mother. Since her car is in the shop, she's asked you to go to the grocery store and pick up a few odds and ends for her. Bread, milk, cereal, and chicken breasts. After writing down a small list, you reluctantly get in the car and pick up the items at the store. The lady cashier then makes an odd remark to you. You know, we're in no danger of a milk shortage. Upon arriving back at her house, you knock several times. No answer. You decided to try the door, and it opens. You place the grocery bag on the counter, but notice something strange. There seems to be 6 other grocery bags, each with completely identical contents. And a couple, the chicken and the milk, have gone bad. Mom? You call out, but there's no answer. You make your way through the kitchen and into the living room. Sitting on the couch with her head cut off and neatly resting on her lap is your mother. In reaction to this, you call the police, who come over to investigate. They mention that she has been dead for almost a week. Furthermore, the police psychiatrist is at the scene and talks to you. After you give your initial statement, sitting on the front steps, you overhear the psychiatrist talking with the crime scene investigator. It's not uncommon for people suffering from schizophrenia to get locked into a series of repetitive behaviors, he says. You think to yourself, what? They can't be talking about me. Schizophrenia? No way. Repetitive behavior? Do they think I did this? Suddenly your cell phone goes off. Hello? Hi, hon. It's me. Could you stop at the store and pick up some chicken and milk? Oh, and I need some bread and cereal, too. No problem, Mom. I'll be right over. In the last decade and a half, it's become infinitely easier to obtain exactly what you're looking for by way of a couple of keystrokes. The internet has made it all too simple to use a computer to change reality almost. An abundance of information is merely a search engine away, to the point when it's hard to imagine life as any different. Yet, a generation ago, when the words streaming and torrent were meaningless save for conversations about water, people met face-to-face to conduct software swap parties, trading games and applications on Sharpie-labeled 5 1/4-inch floppies. Of course, most of the time, the meets were a way for frugal, community-minded individuals to trade popular games like King's Quest and Maniac Mansion amongst themselves. However, a few early programming talents designed their own computer games to share amongst their circle of acquaintances, who in turn would pass them on, until, if fun and well-designed enough, an independently developed game had its place in the collection of aficionados across the country. Think of it as the 80s equivalent of a viral video. Pale Luna, on the other hand, was never circulated outside of the San Francisco Bay Area. All known copies have long been disposed of. All computers that have ever run the game, now detritus buried under layers of filth and polystyrene. This fact is attributed to a number of rather abstruse design choices made by its programmer. Pale Luna was a text adventure game, in the vein of Zork and the Lurking Horror. At a time when said genre was swiftly going out of fashion. Upon booting up the program, the player was presented with an almost completely blank screen, except for the text. You are in a dark room. Moonlight shines through the window. There is gold in the corner, along with a shovel and a rope. There is a door to the east. Command? So began the game that one writer for a long out-of-print fanzine decried as enigmatic, nonsensical, and completely unplayable, as the only commands that the game would accept were pick up gold, pick up shovel, pick up rope, open door, and go east. The player is soon presented with the following. Reap your reward. Pale Luna smiles at you. You are in a forest. There are paths to the northwest and east. Command? What quickly infuriated the few who have played the game was the confusing and buggy nature of the second screen onward. Only one of the directional decisions would be the correct one. For example, on this occasion, a command to go in a direction other than north would lead to the system freezing, requiring the operator to hard reboot the entire computer. Furthermore, any subsequent screens seem to merely repeat the above text, with the difference being only the directions available. Worse still, the standard text adventure commands appear to be useless. The only accepted non-movement related prompts were use gold, which caused the game to display the message, not here. Use shovel, which brought up not now, and use rope, which prompted the text, you've already used this. Most who played the game progressed a couple of screens into it before becoming fed up of having to constantly reboot their devices and tossing the disc in rage, writing off the experience as a shoddily programmed farce. However, there is one thing about the world of computers that remains true. No matter the era, some people who use them have way too much time on their hands. A young man by the name of Michael Nevins decided to see if there was more to Pale Luna than what met the eye. 5 hours and 33 screens worth of trial and error and unplugged computer cords later, he finally managed to make the game display different text. The text in this new area read, Pale Luna smiles wide. There are no paths. Pale Luna smiles wide. The ground is soft. Pale Luna smiles wide. Here. Command? It was again another hour before Nevin stumbled upon the proper combination of phrases to make the game progress any further. Dig hole, drop gold, then fill hole. This caused the screen to display, congratulations, 40.24248 minus 121.4434. Upon which the game ceased to accept commands, requiring the user to reboot one last time. After some deliberation, Nevins came to the realization that the numbers referred to the lines of latitude and longitude. The coordinates led to a point in the sprawling forest that dominated the nearby Lassen Volcanic Park. As he possessed much more free time than sense, Nevins vowed to see Pale Luna through to its ending. The next day, armed with a map, a compass, and a shovel, he navigated the park's trails, noting with amusement how each turn he made corresponded roughly to those that he took in the game. Though he initially regretted bringing the cumbersome digging tool on a mere hunch, the path's similarities all but confirmed his suspicions that the journey would end with him face to face with an eccentric's buried treasure. Out of breath after a tricky struggle to the coordinates, he was pleasantly surprised by a literal stumble upon a patch of uneven dirt. Shoveling as excitedly as he was, it would be an understatement to say that he was taken aback when his heavy digging unearthed the badly decomposing head of a blonde-haired little girl. Nevins promptly reported the situation to the authorities. The girl was identified as Karen Paulson, 11, reported as missing to the San Diego Police Department a year and a half prior. Efforts were made to track down the programmer of Pale Luna, but the nearly anonymous legal gray area in which the software swapping community operated inescapably led to many dead ends. Collectors have been known to offer upwards of 6 figures for an authentic copy of the game, and the rest of Karen's body was never found. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my mind which belong to the various homes we lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing another kid in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were made just yesterday. I often wonder whether they are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring. But in my heart, I know they're real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways, it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents only, I came down with a fever. The doctors said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my stuff was already sealed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day. They served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth, because he had a very large mouth. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body, his head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was by far the largest.
"You look kind of like a Furby,"
I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look.
"Furby? What's a Furby?"
he asked. I shrugged.
"You know, the toy. The little robot with the big ears. You can stroke and feed them, almost like a real pet."
Oh,
Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity.
You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend.
I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every single time my mother stopped by to check in on me.
I lay under your bed.
He later explained.
I don't want your parents to see me, because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore.
We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and the pictures they contained. The third or fourth month after I met him, he greeted me with a particularly large smile on his face.
I have a new game we can play.
He said.
We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game.
After my mother delivered me more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand.
We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway.
I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission. But Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across it and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out at the ground below. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle, the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline.
I like to play pretend up here.
Mr. Widemouth explained.
I pretend that there is a big, soft, bouncy trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try.
I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility.
It's a long drop,
I said.
But that's all part of the fun. It wouldn't be exciting if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline.
I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed.
Maybe some other time,
I said.
I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt.
Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment.
If you say so,
he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box.
I want to teach you how to juggle. Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons.
I looked into the box, and it was full of various knives.
My parents will kill me,
I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room. Objects that my parents would never allow me to touch.
I'll be spanked and grounded for a year.
Mr. Widemouth frowned.
It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it.
I pushed the box away.
I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw around in the air.
Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid back under my bed, remaining there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was underneath me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying that he had put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I just couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth was persistent. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump out of the window. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined in my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my shoes and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me outside.
I have something I want you to see.
He told me. I must have given him a weird look because he then said,
It's safe, I promise.
I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail, which ran through the woods behind the house.
This is an important path.
He explained.
I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day, I hope to take you there.
When I eventually did return to the house, I wondered just what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would soon be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I was leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that his intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow, with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a 6-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man about to run a marathon, not one about to spend 2 days sitting still. Early enough for you? My father asked with a hint of sympathy. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. This is the last move, son. I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends. I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. Mr. Widemouth's silhouette was in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road, at which point he gave a pitiful little wave goodbye. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty, except for the foundation, as the building had burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living bejesus out of me. But I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children.